Before the video does begin, the new code for today is JJKPP Special. This is given 10,000 Beacon of Recollection bits, which considering that the final quest to farm Beacon of Recollection bits only gives 600 per quest, 10,000 is actually pretty decent for one code, so go ahead and do it right now if you haven't already done so. So one of the best parts about Phantom Parade when compared to most gacha games is that even almost a year later on the Japanese version, there are many rare and SR characters that are worth using, and that's the focus for today's video, to quickly go over some characters that are worth investing in, because this game isn't just about building a team full of SSRs. You do want to build SRs, and if possible, even build some rares. Using my team as an example right now, this is what I've basically been using, switching between Nobara and also Yuji. But two mainstay characters on my team are SR Yaga and SR Nanami. Nanami in particular is low-key better than the SSR one. But why exactly is that? Well, most of the SRs that we are talking about today are just strictly debuffers, buffers, and support units. The SSR characters mainly fulfill the role of DPS units, the occasional tank, and to make those SSRs even better, maybe have more survivability, you are going to want to use someone like Yaga, for example. And realistically, it's going to be for his second skill here. With a 20 Curse Energy, you'll give your entire team a 31% physical and Curse Technique increase for 4 turns. And keep in mind, this does stack, so you can use it multiple turns back to back to give your team even more stats. Yaga in particular is definitely the best example of an SR that in all honesty could have been an SSR with just higher stats, and people would have recommended the pull for him. He's a mainstay in a lot of teams. I've been using him for 99% of this game's content, and from what I'm seeing even a year later on the Japanese version is still a character constantly being used. The fact that he's an SR makes it easier for him to be pulled for, potentially get duplicates, but strictly speaking, the main reason why you'd want him in your team is for this second skill here. However, that's not all that he does offer. His first skill in particular does a decent amount of damage, nothing super crazy, but depending on the enemy that you do attack here, it will apply a debuff where they take 30% more damage for 2 turns. That, of course, is really good, and if the character is still alive or if the quest isn't over, by the time you unlock his ultimate, he will then apply another debuff while again doing damage to let your team do 25% more damage. This is actually a pretty good ultimate, an ultimate that I very rarely ever get to use because the amount of damage my team is doing thanks to this one character means that I very rarely ever get to see his ultimate, but basically every skill here, his second, third, and also ultimate are all just skills that make your team do more damage. In terms of skills that are worth investing in, I would definitely recommend the second one. It's the skill you use more often than not, and Yaga is definitely a character you want to pull for. A second character, someone that works alongside Yaga, is going to be Nanami. Coincidentally, same reason for him. Second skill is going to increase the damage for your allies. For consuming 20 energy, he will be giving himself a 31% damage dealt increase, while at the same time giving your entire team 23%. And of course, this does get higher the more you upgrade the skill. This will be lasting for 4 turns, and again is stackable. So using Nanami alongside Yaga, you're just giving your main DPS units more often than not Nobara and also Gojo just significantly more damage. It's absolutely crazy. And considering that he's also getting some damage buffs himself, there are times where I have to use his, third skill, for example, maybe even sometimes his ultimate if the quest does last that long, and he's able to do some respectable damage. There have definitely been cases where I literally only just beat the quest, maybe just in time for Gojo to leave because the damage that this character can also deal. Speaking of his ultimate though, not only does it do damage, it will also give his entire team a 14% damage increase for 2 more turns. In terms of SRs, Nanami and also Yaga are definitely the prime examples. Let's talk about some other SRs. And one SR I'm definitely going to start working on, especially later today, is Miwa. I currently don't own Panda or any really good tank, so Miwa is going to fulfill that role. She is a defense-focused unit, and that mainly comes from her second skill. For consuming 30 energy, she is going to apply Invasion on herself for 2 turns, but only 1 time, while at the same time drawing the attack to her, and at the same time also buff her physical technique. Now this skill in particular doesn't even need to be upgraded, because the upgrade that you do get here is only to the physical technique increase, not so much the evasion/dodge. So if you are using it for that purpose, this skill, unless you wanted to do a bit more damage, can stay at level 1. Her third skill has her activate a counterattack status, where when she's attacked, she would then deal damage back to the enemy. And it's probably worth mentioning too, her auto skill, every time a new wave starts, she will auto target enemy and aggro them to her. So even if you aren't using your skill, it is taking aggro off one enemy that could potentially save your more important units. And maybe if you give her a particular recollection that can decrease the damage that she takes, maybe healer, she definitely can serve the role as a defense-focused unit. Going back to supports though, Momo is also worth using, more so for her second and third skill. Her second skill in this case is going to be a 41% damage dealt increase to all your allies for only 1 time, by the way, but lasting 2 turns. Unfortunately, this does mean that you can't really stack it all too much. damage. In regarding to buffing units, Yaga and also Nanami are better, but she also does apply evasion to herself, so even though she isn't as good as a buffing unit, she does have that maybe extra survivability, adding evasion to herself. And then her third skill can actually be really good to, depending how lucky you do get. It's an AoE attack that has a 50% chance to stun all enemies, while at the same time adding evasion to herself, further adding to her survivability. And if you are in a maybe stage where there's a bunch of enemies that are doing a lot of damage, you need that survivability. It guarantees that she almost survives that wave, but also maybe your allies will survive that wave, depending on how many enemies you do stun. Speaking of stunning though, her ultimate also does have a chance to stun. It's an AoE one, 40% this time, will get higher the more you upgrade this skill, while once more adding evasion. So she's a buffing unit, a stunner, to multiple enemies, not just one. Moving away from SRs though, although we will go back to another SR, a character I do not own in a second, but in this case we have Kaito Yuki, the game original character. He's a rare character, so very likely you already own him, and you can definitely get a usage out of him, and it's mainly due to his 2 skills and also ultimate. His first skill in particular is going to be a 25% damage taken decrease, so add more survivability to your team. It's only to 1 ally, however it does last 3 turns, and it only consumes 10 energy, so you can use this almost every single turn. And in certain situations, you can give this buff to all your characters, at least for 1 turn, if you keep picking a new ally every next turn. His third skill, consuming 30 energy, is going to apply effect where all your allies recover 10 extra energy every turn for 2 turns. So extra energy overall is going to be a good thing. This skill can get even crazier. Remember, this is level 1. Every time you do level it up, it will increase the amount you recover by 1. So at max, it's giving your entire team 20% more cursed energy every turn for 2 turns. Keep in mind though, this doesn't go for himself. Otherwise, you'd be able to spam this, so it kind of makes sense. But more energy is never a bad thing. And then lastly, his final ability will be buffing your ally's curse technique by 64% for 3 turns. And every time you do level this up, it will increase that effect by 7%. So this can get quite high. Really high, actually. You can get that to like above 100%. So a character doing all that as a rare is actually really, really good. Now, Kaito's not the only R that you can use. Someone like Inumaki is also a perfectly usable rare character. In this case, looking at skill number 1, for consuming 30 energy, you will reduce the amount of damage your teammates do take by 25% for 2 times, lasting 2 turns, while also at the same time recovering some ultimate gauge for them. This does come at the cost of him taking damage like every Inumaki does, but nonetheless, an AoE defense damage taken buff is actually really good. His third skill, costing 20 energy, is a 95% chance to stun the enemy for 1 turn. This is a skill, again, you don't really need to upgrade. It's perfectly fine at level 1, but this is going to be really good for stalling at enemies if you really need to. And this character is really only being used for skill 2 and 3. His ultimate and normal skill really doesn't do much, but it's another rare character that's definitely worth looking into if you need that extra bit of support. And I guess lastly, maybe there's an extra rare worth talking about. Panda. He's going to be a defensive character, giving your team a buff where they take less damage, and you can use this every turn, to be fair. While his third skill does draw attack to himself, but also decreasing the damage he does take. So he's going to play the defensive role. And the final character for the time being to talk about is going to be once more Kaito Yuki. In this case, his SR version. Surprisingly, despite the amount of pulls that I've done in the game thus far, I've not gotten him. But if you have, you can definitely make a use out of him. In this case, his first skill, a skill that doesn't consume any energy, despite it doing damage 70% of his Jujutsu, his curse technique, he will decrease the amount of damage the enemy does do for 1 turn. Honestly, that's not bad, considering the fact that it's consuming no energy. His second skill will be very similar to his rare version, but this time it's an AoE to your allies, giving them reduced damage taken, but only to specifically cursed energy. But this does last 3 turns. Once more, could potentially be stackable if we want to use it back to back. If you are in a quest where you know the enemy is doing a lot of curse damage, definitely worth using this. And then his third skill in this case is going to grant 1 ally attack nullification. This means they take no damage. Very similar to what Gojo does have. It is specifically only for 2 times. It is specifically only going to last 3 turns and only dodge 2 attacks. But that's still extra survivability that you can give on top of the fact that you are reducing damage. While at the same time, depending on the character you do pick, it will increase their Jujutsu damage, curse damage, by 15%. And that will last 3 turns. It does cost 40, so it is quite an expensive one. But nonetheless, still a good ability, especially for an SR. And then his ultimate will be doing some damage, but most importantly, having an 80% chance to stun that enemy for 1 turn. But overall, they're basically the main low rarity characters that are definitely worth looking into, definitely worth using. The main takeaway, the main 2 you want to definitely use is Yaga and Nanami. They're going to be mainstays in a lot of teams, even in the future. But as we are just beginning the game, not everyone's worked on their characters, maxed them out. right now is a good time to experiment with different characters or low rarity characters to help you beat some of those more difficult quests. Obviously, these characters don't replace the need of an extra really good DPS unit like Nabara and also Gojo, but some of these characters do work alongside them, giving them better survivability and at the same time giving them more damage. Either way, I hope you liked and enjoyed the video. Let me know if you're using any other rare characters or SRs in the comments below. Until next time, take care and peace.